I swapped my cheating wife's lube for glue, and the doctors had to pull them apart. Betrayal stories. When I found a tube of lubricant hidden in the back of my wife's underwear drawer, I knew Susan was cheating. But when I discovered her partner was Derek, our own daughter's husband, my world collapsed. Susan wasn't just a cheating wife. After nearly 40 years of marriage, she was a woman willing to kill her husband for a payout. They wanted to play games with my life? Fine. But what I did to them next made them both scream. Before I tell you exactly how I handled Derek and Susan, please subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from. Stories like this need to be shared to warn others about predators hiding in plain sight. My name is Jim Patterson. This is the story of how I discovered my wife was planning to murder me for life insurance money, and how she was doing it with our own son-in-law. The first cracks the suspicion started on a Friday afternoon. For weeks, Susan had been acting strange. At 59, my blonde, soft-spoken wife had suddenly stopped looking me in the eye. She was constantly glued to her phone, tilting the screen away whenever I walked by. She started wearing expensive perfume again, something she hadn't done in years. Then there was Derek Martinez, our 33-year-old son-in-law. A landscaper married to our daughter, Jessica. He started showing up at our Tampa home constantly. He always had an excuse. He needed a tool, he wanted to check the sprinklers, he was worried about a palm tree. But Derek only seemed to visit when he thought I was working late. That Friday, a migraine sent me home early. I saw Derek's white pickup parked across the street. Walking inside quietly, I heard voices from the kitchen. Susan's laugh, but it was different. It was younger, flirtatious. "You're terrible," she giggled, followed by Derek's deep chuckle. When I walked in, Susan jumped so hard her chair scraped the floor. Derek was leaning against the counter, drinking coffee from my favorite mug, looking perfectly relaxed. "Jim, you're home early." Susan's voice was too bright, too forced. Derek flashed his easy smile. "Just checking the irrigation, Jim. Noticed some brown spots on the lawn." The explanation was logical, but the air in the room was heavy. I caught the look that passed between them, a silent, loaded communication. They weren't just talking about grass. The discovery the next morning, while Susan was asleep, I looked for my reading glasses in her dresser. My fingers brushed against something cold and plastic tucked under her silk nightgowns, a high-end tube of personal lubricant. Susan and I hadn't been intimate in over 2 years. We'd accepted it as a part of aging. So why was this here? And why was it hidden like a guilty secret? Looking at my wife sleeping peacefully, she suddenly felt like a complete stranger. The wiretap I needed proof. On Monday, I bought a voice-activated recorder from Radio Shack. I told Susan I'd be working late on inventory and instead doubled back, hiding the device behind a bookshelf in the living room. That evening, I watched from down the block as Derek's truck arrived. He went inside. Susan had told me she was out with girlfriends, but she was at home, dressed up for a man half her age. The next day, I listened to the recording. I expected to hear an affair. I didn't expect to hear a murder plot. "Did you call the insurance company?" Derek's voice was chillingly professional. "I did," Susan replied. "The policy is $500,000. I'm the sole beneficiary." "Good. He has no idea I've switched his meds. These pills look identical to his blood pressure medication, but they'll gradually spike his pressure. It'll look like a natural heart attack in 3 months. No one will question it." They laughed about disappearing to Costa Rica. They called me boring old Jim. They even talked about how our daughter, a paramedic, wouldn't suspect a thing. My heart didn't just break, it hardened. They had underestimated me. The predator's trail. I didn't go to the police yet. I wanted to see who I was really dealing with. I followed Derek the next day. He didn't go to work. He went to a mansion 3 houses down from us. then to a luxury condo in Hyde Park, then to Westchase. At every stop, an older, wealthy woman greeted him with intimate familiarity. Derek wasn't just a landscaper. He was a professional con artist. He was seducing lonely women and bleeding them dry. One neighbor, Elena, broke down when I confronted her. She had already given him $15,000 and put him in her will. Susan wasn't the one for Derek. She was just the biggest score because she was willing to kill for him. The trap is set. I spent 40 years in retail management. I know how to solve problems and I know my inventory. I went to the Home Depot warehouse and gathered my supplies: industrial-grade construction adhesive, a Bluetooth speaker, and a remote-triggered smoke alarm. The plan was elegant. They used intimacy as a weapon. I would use it as their prison. The glue was clear and odorless, identical in texture to the lubricant Susan kept in her drawer. I swapped them out. I also rigged the house with a high-decibel alarm and a speaker that would broadcast screams for help once triggered. I knew that when the smoke alarm went off, the fire department would respond. And since my daughter Jessica was a paramedic supervisor in this district, there was a high chance she would be the one to break down the door. It would be devastating for her to see the truth, but it would free her from a monster. I wasn't just seeking revenge. I was performing an exorcism on my family. As I sat in my garage on Sunday night, I finally felt in control. Derek and Susan wanted to end my life for a beach house. Instead, I was going to give them a front-row seat to their own destruction. The setup during my lunch break, I installed a secondary smoke detector in our living room. To any observer, it looked identical to our existing system, but this one was different. It was controlled by a remote trigger on my phone. Susan and Derek met every Tuesday when I was supposedly stuck at the store doing inventory. Tomorrow was Tuesday. Tomorrow, their routine would become their prison. That evening, I ran a final check in the garage. Remote trigger. Perfect. Bluetooth speaker. Connected. The tube of construction adhesive looked exactly like Susan's hidden lubricant. I rehearsed the sequence in my head. Wait for Derek. Give them 30 minutes. Trigger the alarm. Activate the distress sounds. Then, return home as the concerned husband, just as the sirens arrived. Timing was everything. Too early, and they wouldn't be compromised. Too late, and the moment would pass. Tuesday, the point of no return. Tuesday morning, I called Susan. Honey, I'm going to be really late. Garden center inventory. I might not be home until 10 o'clock. Oh, that's fine, she said, her excitement barely masked. I'll just watch some TV and head to bed early. Don't wait up. Susan. I love you, I said. There was a pause. I love you too, Jim. It was likely the last lie we'd ever tell each other. By 3 p.m., I was parked 2 blocks away. At 3:15, Derek's white pickup appeared right on schedule. He walked to the front door carrying a small bag, wine or flowers, no doubt. He had no idea he was walking into a trap 40 years in the making. Inside the house I waited 30 minutes, my heart hammering against my ribs. Then, I quietly approached the house through the backyard. Using my spare key, I slipped into the kitchen. The sounds of laughter drifted down from upstairs, relaxed, intimate sounds of 2 people who thought they were untouchable. I moved like a ghost through my own home. First stop, our bedroom. Susan's drawer was slightly ajar. She'd already moved the lubricant to the nightstand. I found the tube, unscrewed the cap, and emptied the clear gel into the sink. I refilled it with the industrial superglue, careful not to leave a single drop on the packaging. Same weight, same look, same consistency. In the heat of the moment, they would never notice. I placed the tube back and moved to the living room. I tucked the Bluetooth speaker behind the couch for maximum volume and checked the signal on my phone. Everything was set. I slipped back out to my truck and watched. The sun began to set, casting long, peaceful shadows over our suburb. Mrs. Rodriguez was watering her lawn. Kids were riding bikes. No one knew that our quiet street was about to become the scene of the scandal of the decade. The Bond at 5 p.m., the music from the bedroom stopped. Through the open window, I heard Derek whisper, "You're so beautiful. I've been thinking about this all day." "I thought of everything," Susan replied breathlessly. I closed my eyes and waited. A few minutes later, the tone changed. It wasn't romantic anymore. It was confused. "Wait," Derek's voice was suddenly sharp. "Something feels wrong." "What do you mean?" "I can't. We're stuck. Susan, we're literally stuck together." "What was in that tube?" "It was just lubricant. The same kind I always use." Susan's voice spiked into a scream. "Well, it's not working. We can't separate." I could hear them struggling. The industrial glue was doing exactly what it was engineered to do, creating a permanent, unbreakable bond. Their panic was music to my ears. For weeks, they had coldly planned my death. Now, they were learning what it felt like to have no escape. The public reveal, but the real humiliation was just beginning. I opened the app on my phone. First, I triggered the modified smoke detector. A piercing, high-pitched shriek cut through the afternoon air. Then, I hit play on the Bluetooth speaker. Terrifying, pre-recorded screams for help began blasting from inside the house. "Help us! Fire! We're trapped! Please, someone call 911. The effect was instantaneous. Neighbors began spilling out of their houses. Mrs. Rodriguez dropped her hose and ran toward our porch. "Oh my God! Jim and Susan's house is on fire." Mr. Chen was already on his phone. "I'm calling 911. There's a fire on Maple Street. People are trapped inside. We can hear them screaming." The stage was set. The audience had arrived. The neighborhood gathers. The beautiful irony was that Derek and Susan could hear everything happening outside, but they were in no position to explain. They were physically fused together in our master bedroom, desperately and fruitlessly, trying to separate before their secret was exposed to the world. "I don't see any smoke," Mrs. Rodriguez noted, peering at the house. "It must be just starting," Mr. Chen replied, his voice tight. "But listen, you can hear them screaming." The recorded distress calls continued to broadcast, perfect in their execution, right down to the sounds of choking and coughing. As the crowd grew, someone pointed to the driveway. "Whose truck is that?" "Isn't that Derek's?" "Jessica's husband?" Mrs. Rodriguez whispered. "What's he doing here while Jim's at work?" I could practically see the gears turning in their heads. The image of the helpful son-in-law was beginning to dissolve. The arrival of Rescue Unit 12, then came the sirens. A full convoy of red trucks, ambulances, and police cars raced down the street. Leading them was Rescue Unit 12, Jessica's unit. I watched my daughter jump from the passenger seat, her paramedic uniform crisp and professional. She looked determined, ready to save lives, with no idea she was about to walk into the wreckage of her own. "What's the situation?" she shouted. "House fire. People trapped." Mr. Chen yelled back. Jessica didn't hesitate. She led her team to the front door, her training taking complete control. I started my truck and began driving slowly toward the house, preparing to play my role, the shocked husband arriving home to a nightmare. The confrontation inside, the fire department breached the door with a sledgehammer. Jessica moved through the living room with professional efficiency, searching for smoke that wasn't there. Then, Derek's muffled, panicked voice drifted from upstairs. "Up here. The bedroom. We need help." Jessica took the stairs 2 at a time. She reached the door and knocked hard. "Tampa Fire Rescue. Are you injured?" "There's been an accident," Derek's voice strained. We need medical assistance." When Jessica pushed the door open, she froze. Her husband and her mother were in bed together, naked, panicked, and physically bonded in a way that made no sense. For a long moment, her professional training and her personal reality collided. "Jessica." "I can explain," Derek whispered. "Something went wrong," Susan cried, unable to meet her daughter's eyes. "We're stuck. We can't separate." Jessica stood there, medical bag in one hand, radio in the other, staring at the two people who had just vaporized her world. Behind her, Captain Morrison appeared. "Oh, hell," he muttered. This is a situation." The extraction Jessica's training finally kicked back in, though her voice was now like ice. "We need acetone and medical adhesive remover," she called down to her team. "Bring the skin separation kit and pain management." She worked with mechanical precision. The irony was devastating. She was literally pulling apart the two people who had torn her family to pieces. Outside, the walk of shame was even more public. The neighbors were out in force, phones recording everything. When the stretchers finally emerged, the crowd went wild. Derek was wheeled out first, a white sheet draped over his humiliation. "Derek Martinez," Mrs. Rodriguez shouted. "How could you do this to Jessica?" Then came Susan, mortified and sobbing. "Susan Patterson," Mrs. Williams announced for the whole street to hear. "I am absolutely shocked after everything Jim has done for you." I stood there, the picture of a devastated husband. "I don't understand," I told the neighbors, my voice breaking perfectly. "I trusted him." The final sting 2 hours later, I was at Tampa General Hospital. Jessica was drained, sitting silently by my side. "They're in rooms 214 and 216, she told me. "Physically fine, just some skin irritation." I went to Susan first. She was crying, babbling about how Derek loved her and how we hadn't been close. I played the wounded soul, kissed her forehead, and left. But on my way out, I noticed the tube of healing gel the nurse had left for her. I ducked into a supply closet, pulled out a tube of industrial-strength capsaicin cream, essentially concentrated liquid fire, and swapped them. I did the same for Derek in room 216 while he was dozing. I returned to the waiting area to sit with Jessica. An hour later, the screaming started. "Help! It's burning!" Susan's voice shrieked from 214. Seconds later, Derek's voice joined in from 216. "Nurse! The gel! Something's wrong." Jessica and the medical staff rushed into the rooms. Susan was writhing, trying to wipe the healing gel off her raw skin. It was like fire. Derek was in agony in the next room. "Get milk and cooking oil," Jessica shouted. "This is capsaicin exposure." As the doctors scrambled, wondering how manufacturing errors could lead to pepper cream in a medical tube, I sat in the hallway and let out a long, slow breath. The burning they felt was only a fraction of the betrayal they'd planned for me. Derek's con game was dead. Susan's marriage was over. And Jim Patterson? Boring old Jim had ensured that while they were dreaming of Costa Rica, they'd be waking up to a reality that burned. Susan and Derek were both howling, their skin a raw, angry red where they had applied my special healing gel. "The pain should subside in about 30 minutes, Dr. Martinez told them, sounding baffled. "But this is highly unusual. We'll have to report this batch to the manufacturer." I stood in the hallway, watching the chaos with a deep, quiet satisfaction. The industrial-strength capsaicin from Home Depot's pest control aisle was doing exactly what it was meant to do, delivering a searing reminder of their betrayal. "How are you holding up, Dad?" Jessica asked, her hand trembling on my shoulder. "I just don't understand," I replied, shaking my head with a heavy sigh. "The affair, and now this medical accident. It's like everything is falling apart." The confrontation of the mark as the doctors worked, a commotion broke out by the elevators. Mrs. Rodriguez, my neighbor, marched toward us. Her face was flushed with a sense of purpose I'd never seen before. "Jim," she called out, "I heard what happened. I heard about Derek and Susan." "Elena, this isn't the time," I said gently. "We're in the middle of a medical emergency." "No, Jim," she said, her voice cutting through the hospital chatter. "This is exactly the time. Because Derek Martinez isn't who you think he is." Jessica looked up, confused. "Mrs. Rodriguez, what do you mean?" Elena looked toward Derek's room, where his moans were still audible. "I mean your husband is a predator, Jessica. And Jim, you aren't his only victim." The hallway went dead silent. Elena clutched her purse, her hands shaking. "He's been having an affair with me for 8 months. He told me he loved me, that he was leaving his wife. He took $15,000 from me for his business." Jessica staggered back against the wall. "That's impossible." "I started making calls after I heard the news," Elena continued, pulling out her phone. "Margaret Chen, Patricia Williams, Linda Foster. Derek has been dating all of them." The victims unite as if on cue. The elevator opened again. Margaret and Patricia stepped out, looking shell-shocked. For the next hour, the women compared notes. The pattern was identical. Derek would charm wealthy, lonely older women, then slowly bleed them dry with business emergencies. "He helped me update my will," Linda Foster admitted quietly. "He's a $25,000 beneficiary. $50,000 for me," Margaret added. Jessica listened in stunned silence. When Patricia mentioned that Derek had keys to her house and access to her bank accounts, Jessica finally snapped out of her shock. "We need to call the police." "Already did," Elena said. "Detective Morrison is on his way." The arrest Detective Morrison was a veteran who had seen every con in Tampa. He didn't fall for Derek's misunderstood landscaper act. "Mr. Martinez," the detective said, entering the room, "your business license expired 2 years ago. No tax filings, no legitimate income. And then there's the matter of the life insurance." Derek's face went pale. "Insurance? I don't know." "We have recordings," Morrison countered. "Voice-activated digital recorders. Very small, very clear. You and Mrs. Patterson were planning a murder." I watched from the hallway as Derek was cuffed to the hospital bed, his hands still red and stinging from the capsaicin. In the next room, Susan was being read her rights. Jessica turned to me, tears in her eyes. "Dad, how did you know to record them?" I put my arm around her. "I didn't, sweetheart. I found the device after the fire department left. It must have been triggered by all the noise. Pure luck. It was a perfect lie, and it was the only one she needed to hear." The aftermath, the scandal exploded across Tampa. "Local landscaper arrested in multi-victim con," was the headline of the Tampa Bay Times. The community rallied around me. I became the face of the wronged husband, the man who had been betrayed by those closest to him. I filed for divorce immediately. Between the adultery and the conspiracy charges, I kept everything: the house, the pension, the life insurance. Most importantly, I watched the other women get justice. Margaret got her money back. Linda got her truck back. The sugar mommy hunter was going to prison for 28 years. A new chapter 6 months later. Jessica and I sat on our front porch, watching the sunset over Tampa Bay. She'd been promoted to district supervisor at the fire department, and I was working part-time as a consultant. "Dad," she said quietly, "do you ever regret how it happened? The way they were caught. I thought about it. I regret that you had to see it. I regret the betrayal. But do I regret that they faced the consequences? Not for a second." Jessica nodded, squeezing my hand. We're stronger now. I felt a genuine sense of contentment. I'd helped 3 other families in the neighborhood spot romance scams since the arrest. They called me a superhero, but I was just a man who used 40 years of problem-solving skills to protect his family. Derek Martinez thought he could destroy a boring 64-year-old manager. Instead, he learned that the quiet ones are the ones you should fear most. Justice doesn't always come from a courtroom. Sometimes it comes from a man who refuses to be a victim. Truth always surfaces. God sees everything, even in our darkest moments. And sometimes, the best way to serve revenge is with a little bit of industrial adhesive and a lot of patience. If this story of justice and family resilience touched you, please share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever stood up to someone who underestimated you? Subscribe for more true stories of courage and the unbreakable bonds of family.